So arguably the most important part of Inventor, of making an assembly in Inventor is making the parts interact and constrain them to each other in a way that you want. So since you guys already know how to import files both from online and your file directory, I'm just going to start demonstrating. So I'm going to start again, make sure that it's on place if you're trying to place from your directory. And I'm going to go to my folder, libraries, documents, Sonnet. I'm going to go to my CAD folder. So for this case, I'm going to demonstrate using some of my folder, my files from, actually, I'll use some of my files from here. Okay, that's fine. So you'll see that I have a lot of downloaded files. So after you take a file off of online and you download it and then you convert it, like I showed you earlier, you will get a bunch of these parts. So I'm just gonna open a bunch of them. You can open them one by one, or you can just do this and select. You can also you can also control select, and then it'll like let you select more than one, but I'm just gonna select those two. I don't really know what they are, it's fine. So I'll just place them. You can rotate if you want, hit escape. So I'm gonna use these two parts and just demonstrate the constraint. So when you're constraining things together in the assembly, the most important thing is this button, this constraint button. So once you click it, you'll see that there's a lot of different options. And for every single option, there's like multiple options. Like there's so many. But for our case, the most important one is definitely this one. This one is called the mate function. Occasionally, you'll use the angle and then tangent and then insert, but that comes later once you're more advanced in CAD. But for most things, constraint works just fine. So within the constraint, I mean the mate function, you have two. You can either choose to mate or flush. So what mate does is it constrains two faces so that they're touching each other. So what I mean by that is if you have this part and this part and you make these two faces, then it'll do this. Alternatively, if you toggle to this and you do the flush and you have this face and this face, instead of doing this like they would have made, they'll do this so that the faces will be facing the same direction. So that's how those two work. I'm going to demonstrate them in CAD so you can understand my concept a little bit more. So you have this, right? I'm going to select this face and this face. You'll see that for flush, now it's rotated. These two are facing the same direction and then they're in line. And you can see that now they move together because these two faces have to stay in line on the same plane at all times. If you want to delete the constraint, you just click this little plus button on the side. And then you just click this, right click, and then you can just delete constraint. And then you'll see now when I move it, since I deleted the constraint, they're not related to each other in any way, and it's totally fine. So you can also choose to do the mate constraint. So that would make them touch each other. So if you click this face and this face, what that would do is if you click OK and you rotate this, you'll see that now these two faces are touching. If I do the right side view, you can see that they're touching. And even if I try to pull one, or if I ground one of them so that this one can't move, and I pull the other one, this one can't move in the left and right direction. I can only move up and down, and it can only move side to side. So that's how that constraint works. Okay, click the wrong button. Obviously, sometimes for Autodesk Inventor, you want to constrain the axes. What if I want this axis to be in line with this axis? So another really cool thing about this mate constraint is besides constraining faces, it can also constrain lines and points. So if you hover over this, and you'll see that the circle has a little green dot. That means even though it's highlighting the circle, what it's doing is it's constraining the center point. You can also constrain axes. So if you click this, you can tell it's an axis because there's a little line there. And you click this, you can tell it's an axis because there's a little line there. And you click OK, you can see that the two axes are not constrained. So it can't move left, right, up, or down. It can only move front and back. So that's the mate constraint for axes. Obviously, there's a lot of ways you can customize this. For example, the mate constraint. I want this face and this face to touch, but I want there to be, I don't know, 1 inch in between them. Just click the offset, you can do 1 inch. But you can also make this offset negative if you want them to go in the opposite direction, because you can't toggle the directions when you're constraining something. You can only change the numbers to negative value. Just 1. You click OK. Then you'll see that there's, even though it looks like it's getting closer and farther, if you actually go to the right view, you'll see that can only go, it can't go it can't move in the front and back direction because there is defined a 1-inch gap in between them. And it always has to stay 1 inch. It can't get more or less. So same concept for the flush constraint. You can also flush 2 faces and then define a like space between them. I chose 2 inches. You guys get the idea. You can also actually when you're constraining axes, you cannot do that. So what I mean by that is if I choose for example if I choose this axis and this axis, you'll notice that I can put an offset. That's going to be like 4 inches, which means the axes will always be exactly 4 inches apart. For like constraining axes using the mate, you can also like flip the direction. You can see that my little light gray part there flipped, and you can also just do undirected. There's like a slight difference in between all of them. These two are pretty obvious. They change the direction. There's a special place in time for this one where there isn't a direction, but in most cases you use these two. If you go ahead and click OK, you'll see that from the front view, you'll see that there's 4 inches. You can move it around, but there's always going to be 4 inches between this center axis and this center axis. So that's a quick overview of the constraint tools. The constraint tools are really useful. There's a lot of applications for them, and they're super, super dynamic because there's so much you can do to change. So I hope that all of you guys understood that introduction to constraint.